Dr. Jazz.
Man, I'll just jump in.
Jazz.
I just wanted to ask you, like, I have quite some records of you, and I think the last one I have is Steeplechase, like 2020. And I wanted to ask you, like,
Yeah.
I don't know if that's maybe I'm not up to date, but like, have you been preparing something new? I saw you had like I watched that online stream from Smalls with Mark Copeland, and but what's happening there on the band leading department?
Honestly, how do you say, like, that last record, it was released right in April of 2020.
Oh yeah, COVID. Okay.
You know, um, I would have liked it actually if maybe they had waited like 12 months, 18 months or something for things to open up again. But I guess he wanted to kind of to put it, down the pipeline. So there was not really any ability to promote the record or do anything with it when we were all under COVID lockdown.
Yeah.
We were all like watching the news and
Yeah.
trying to discern whether or not to wear a mask, and all of it. Not to, I'm happy that's in the past, right?
Oh man, that
But
was bizarre. Yeah.
yeah, right. It was
Oh,
was an intense and very how do I say? It was like one of the only times that I can remember where the entire world, oftentimes we watch the news and it's like centralized to
yeah.
one location and the world tunes in and watches, right? But this was affecting everybody,
Yeah. True.
everywhere.
True.
So it was a very interesting time for a record to be released. And I'm really happy that you checked it out.
Yeah. I mean, I love Steeplechase
Thank you.
stuff. It's. I mean, I love your stuff as a band leader. It's. I mean, I want to touch some of the other records as well, but that's why I wanted to start this talk with. If you have something coming up also, or
The last gig that I did, which you had touched upon, was with Mark Copeland,
yeah,
pianist.
that's beautiful. Yeah.
I really like his playing a
Oh,
lot.
amazing.
If you, uh, it doesn't really get much better. He is such a great accompanist.
Hmm.
One, I felt like no matter what register of the saxophone that I was playing, his hands were always like right there, where like the note that I was playing was like if he had a sixth pinky, right? And it's
Yeah.
like he would just play this perfect chord voicing, and then my note would be like right on the top, and it was just every time. He never got in the way. I never felt like I was being led around. I didn't have to chase him or alter my idea to have what I was playing fit with the chord voicing that he chose. Everything was just so tasteful and
Yeah.
perfect. So that was the first time I've played with him, and if I have anything to do about it, I mean, it definitely won't be the last.
Yeah.
I really
Super.
and the hookup was so effortless that if that was the first time, things usually develop the more that
Sure.
people work together. So it would be really interesting to see how things develop with, with a couple more tries at it, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it would be beautiful to hear you. Yeah.
yeah,
This
you
line.
enjoy.
Oh man, I mean, I love his playing so much. With John Abercrombie and all the greats. Drew Grass, the trio, and he's such an amazing player. I mean, and you two had like a really, like you said, yeah, such a beautiful connection there, and yeah, he's such a great listener. I mean, really nice, like you said, yeah.
Oh, it was beautiful.
Yeah.
So hopefully, and the rhythm section, not to leave them out.
Yeah,
Sean,
yeah,
he was really great. Paul Wells, who that's like a little like William Patterson trifecta.
connection.
Paul
Yeah.
Wells, Sean, and myself all went to William Patterson, which was really great.
Yeah.
I got to spend time with Rufus Reed. I believe that was when Rufus Reed was the director
Yeah.
of the program. So it's nice that a lot of the people who went there are still involved in music all these years later.
Yeah, William Patterson was such an important one. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be. There's a trumpet player named Elliot Bild, originally from Chicago, but now he's located in Philadelphia, and he's really great. And speaking about blend, the last time that I played a gig with him, we both placed the pitch right in the same place. There's no like chasing each other around or anything like that. It's all just like exactly where he would phrase it is where I would phrase it, and it just kind of comes together like this really nicely. So that would probably be funds, allowing, obviously, right? I mean, we always are working with a budget, but if there was the budget to have a fifth person in the band, I would like to, bring in.
Well, that would be nice. Yeah.
Writing is really great. Have you checked him out before?
No, I don't know him. I have to check him out.
Elliot Bild, Bild.
Okay.
Yeah, he's
really down, actually.
Yeah.
There's so many musicians out there, man. It's like I think every day or every week I'm like, shit, man, who is this guy? And he has like 8 albums, and I'm like, damn.
Yeah,
incredible.
it's
incredible.
It's a good thing to keep in mind, no matter where you are, how old you are. That there's always someone. You could turn a corner and meet this new person with quite a body of work.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's there's nothing to be bored or you know what I mean. The music is very, very rich right now. There's so many great people.
Yeah. I wanted to, speaking about connections, I checked out on YouTube. There's some footage of you with Liebman and Gene Perla and Adam from last year, I believe. And how did you connect with Liebman? Or a couple of years ago, yeah. How did you connect with Liebman and playing, in that band? Actually, I mean,
that's one of those connections where initially I met Liebman studying as a graduate student at Manhattan School of Music. So there was this chromaticism class where they would teach he and also Phil Markowitz. So Phil was there like the bulk, I would say like 80% of the time. Phil was there, and then Liebman would come in and do these like epic long like 4 or 5, 6 hour master classes when he was in town on the road, right? So the class used this book written by Ludmila Ulela, and I found it pretty interesting. It was very challenging for me. I hear my lines more in the nooks and crannies. I don't want to say like pedestrian or homogenous, but the class pushed my ear as far as what I thought was beautiful. Right. So in the beginning of the class, there were certain sounds that I was like, oh, that's a clash, or it was tense. It created a lot of tension. And then I started to kind of 2 years into it, I started to relate and understand where the moments of resolution are, where the tension resolves, right? And that became more interesting. So 2 years of study with Liebman, and then in the fall of 2011, right before 2012, I moved from Manhattan to the Poconos. And at that time, Liebman was living in the Poconos as well. So there was a steady jam session at a local club. And I played there every Thursday night for like 5 years.
Oh, wow.
With Bill Goodwin, the drummer.
Yeah.
So not a lot, but I would say that like at key moments, right? Like during the holidays when people are home or whatever, Liebman would come in, and that was always a high point. And the session, of course, would take like this arc, like like off into another dimension when Liebman would come. And then I guess later on, Gene Perla and Liebman were talking about starting a group to touch upon that period in the early 70s
with Alvin that they
after
played, right? Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah.
Elvin Jones had put together a band, and if you play saxophone, it's kind of hard to ignore the Live at the Lighthouse, right? That was like the next progression after Coltrane. So that being a cult classic is inarguable, right?
Oh,
So I
yeah,
think
yeah.
Perla and Liebman were like, hey, there's something there. But obviously, the anchor of that whole thing is Elvin Jones. So who were they going to have play the part of Elvin? And that's who's going to do that? Who's going to step into those shoes, right?
Yeah.
Both Perla and Liebman had worked a lot with Adam, and Adam is a very strong individual. His spirit is very strong, as anyone who knows him or has worked with him understands. And I thought it was a perfect fit. We also did one gig where Jeff Watts sat in, and that was obviously
okay.
I mean, Jeff Watts playing that music was really great, obviously, but scheduling and things like that, it became Adam Nussbaum was the one who was devoted to the music and the project, and he was always available, when the gigs came up. So that was the group, yeah. And I think that Liebman coming through that steady session gig and us playing together, then he thought that you can't just take two personalities in that band. Because there's no chords, it really is two saxophones working together, and the volley back and forth. There's an exchange and a conversation back and forth that happens, and also kind of like a healthy competition.
Mm-hmm.
Where if you listen back on the original record, I think
him and Grossman, it's like
they're feeding each other.
Yeah.
I mean, like without the other one, the record couldn't have existed without the two of them. It's not about like who do you like better, this guy or that guy.
Yeah, they're both monsters. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And arguably they do very different things with the rhythm and the time and the harmonic structure. So if you really check out the record a lot, you'll find that both players kind of add their own thing that without those ingredients, it would be missing, right?
Exactly.
So I think that Liebman, I don't know. I mean, you probably have to ask Liebman, right? Because I don't want to speak for him. He's a master.
Sure. Yeah, of course. Sure.
My intuition would say that Liebman liked the fact that that I wasn't solely motivated on like playing over him or through him or trying to beat him or win or something. It was, let's zoom it back. I grew up in a household with a successful saxophonist.
Yeah, I wanted to touch that. Yeah. But since you're there, just go ahead. Yeah.
While we're there, playing with another saxophonist was never at home about a competition or winning. Dad was always better. You know what I mean? Like coming up, Dad was always the master. So it wasn't about trying to upstage or anything like that. It was about that healthy volley and that conversation, So I would like to think that that's why, of all the people out there, because there's a lot of really great tenor players that were probably thinking, why is this guy doing this?
Yeah.
Sure. I'm going to admit it. I mean, come on. And I'm sure there were a lot of people who were like, fuck this guy. Why does he have that gig?
Yeah, but you're perfect together. I mean, it's such a, like you said, it's
well, I'm glad that you say perfect. So you like it. You liked the...
Yeah, well, I mean...
I thought it was an interesting...
What I've heard, I mean, we're talking about Liebman, who's like, there. It's hard to go higher. But it's like you said, it's like, yeah, it's like a basketball game. It's not like, you're passing the ball and what I've heard, and that's beautiful. That's what I guess jazz is all about, the good stuff. I mean,
Thank you. Yeah. It was a high point in my life. It was a beautiful time in my life. It was terrifying.
Man,
It was terrifying to have to go play that,
I'd be scared.
And it's like if you look at the music and stuff, like up in the upper left-hand corner of the page, it didn't say tenor, it said Steve.
Yeah, that's then
You
like,
know?
yeah.
So it's like, oh shit. Okay. They were handwritten pencil charts, a lot of the pencil and stuff. Like you could see that the stuff had been penciled down by one of the three. It was either Steve, Dave, or Gene. And one of the three of those guys put the pencil to the paper back in like 1972. And
Yeah.
it was still existing. It was heavy. I remember driving over to Liebman's house and he just handed me this like crusty envelope, coffee stains, the whole
I
deal.
love that, man.
Yeah. All right. This is the book. Don't lose it. I was like, okay, and then at one point having to drive the book next over to Jeff Watts' house. And I dropped it off with the permission of Gene and, because Jeff was doing a gig at the Jazz Standard, now defunct, unfortunately. I love that club.
Yeah.
And he wanted the Elvin Jones book. But that was a very interesting time. I will say that, and this is where it's the first time I've admitted it. I had checked out the record, but I hadn't really like in depth, like I was doing like a college paper on it or something. You know what I mean? Like I hadn't really checked it out. Like I was like, oh, that's Sombra, or oh, that's New Breed. I knew the tunes, but I didn't know the tunes. I hadn't played any of the music before. I had listened to it, and it was kind of like, as a young saxophone player at Berkeley, you get together with your friends in the dorm room and have you checked this out? So it was always kind of like this golden standard of like what tenor playing after Coltrane, but then kind of before Michael Brecker and Bob Berg, right? It was like this middle ground, right? And that was what people, I think, always used in improv class with Ed Tomasi, or they always talked about this record, right? So I don't know, it was kind of like a Bible or something. Like I was like, okay, it's a revered, awesome record. And then when I got the gig, I had to check out the music, and then I was like, oh shit. Then cue, fear, paranoia, and anxiety. And I really had to dive in and check it out with there's like a transcription book that exists, a saxophonist in Norway. What's his name? Peter or Petter Wetter.
Oh yeah,
W-E-T-T. Yeah. He's Norwegian. He had transcribed all the solos.
Really?
So,
oh man, I have to check it out. Okay.
Yeah, check it out. The transcriptions are very good, and but that's basically it. I got to go all over Europe, down to Santiago, Chile, and all over the United States with that group, and play some cool jazz festivals, and it was good.
How was the first gig like? For you, I mean.
Interesting. I remember driving in with Gene. We both live in Pennsylvania, so we drove in together. I was kind of like wondering what it was going to be like, what happened, and then it was pretty full. There were a lot of people there, and it was good. It was a good gig. It was well received, right? I think that there were people there. I had a lot of fun. I don't think I had too much fun at my own expense or anything. It was good. I didn't realize that it was going to be like 6 years of that. We played on and off, and all of us did other things. The whole time I was doing that gig, I was also with Pat Martino.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you that, later. Yeah.
So what was nice about it, and I think that's a reality of touring today, that if you're not playing with like Taylor Swift or Steely Dan or something, you're not really going out for concentrated, like, I'm going to spend the next 7 months.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
With people, and only these people. So in a 6-year period, we would kind of like regroup, play, and then go and do our own things, and then regroup. And there was a lot of that. It was great.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We made a record actually of, after playing together, playing that music from the 70s. We made a record together, the Vaunts.
There
We
is a
love
record.
There is a record, yeah.
Oh
and
shit!
it's
I didn't know it. Oh, okay, I have to find it. Okay.
yeah, it's on
Super.
PM Records, which is Perla's label.
Ah,
Yeah,
okay, that's why I didn't find it. Okay, yeah, I know the label he
yeah,
has, but okay, I'll try
yeah.
to
No,
find it.
it's not. It's available, and all the, I mean, I hate to say, it's streaming on on the streaming platforms. You can find it rather easily online if you dig for it. But it's
I'll write an email to
the
Gene.
title is
Yeah,
The Vaunts. Yeah,
super. Oh wow, okay, cool, amazing.
yeah, and it's
But
not the music from the 70s. So we all brought in some new tunes.
yeah,
So it's
beautiful,
kind of cool. Yeah.
fantastic.
Anyway,
But
what do you want to talk about?
yeah, Adam, I wanted to ask you. Well, that was a nice start. That was a nice first tune.
Yeah.
No, but you mentioned your dad, and
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about, when did you know that you were going to become a saxophone player? Since, I guess music was in your family, like always, right? And how was that like for you, being
Well,
around your father?
interestingly, like, all right. So, not that I really had a start in it or whatever, but I guess if you had asked, like, as a child, if you had asked me what I wanted to be, you would have gotten like a different answer every 6 months. I was a
Sure,
very
yeah,
normal
okay,
kid.
yeah,
I thought yeah, I want to be a fireman. I want to be you toy with different
the usual
uh,
suspects, yeah,
usual suspects of roles,
yeah,
and you kind of like try them on and envision yourself thinking about it. But I think more realistically, when you get to the end of high school, then there's this pressure of like, well, what are you going to go to college for? Right. So I was thinking about it, and I really didn't. My favorite things were bicycles, like riding and fixing bicycles. And at various times in my life, I've been a bicycle mechanic, right? But
mm,
that's something that I've always had my hands in, as far as like working with my hands and fixing things. And I don't want to say tinkering, because sometimes tinkering implies not finishing.
yeah,
Having tasks, taking things apart, cleaning them, putting them back together, figuring out how they work. That's how my brain is. So I guess 18, 19 years old, my two central focuses were my bicycle as a means of transportation, and also the sport of mountain biking was pretty big. But that's not really like what are you going to go to school for,
yeah,
right? So, well, I want to be a bicycle person. I want to go to school for bicycles. Some people would argue, go to business school, or tech or whatever. But I think it was kind of like, as I was exploring the range of possibilities of what I could do after school, the thing that was the most interesting was to go to music school. And I felt like I already had my feet wet in that
mm.
in that genre and that art form. Both my mom was a piano teacher, and she taught like 40 piano students a week,
Oh wow,
at home. So I heard varying levels of technical ability, and also she would teach a 7-year-old or an adult student, but she had and piano recitals in the living room and stuff like that.
fantastic.
So there was music in the house all the time. And also, if you grow up in an environment where both of your parents are making it happen, mom's teaching lessons, dad's going in and out of New York, and he'll be playing jazz one minute, or he'll be playing piccolo on like the Charmin toilet paper commercial or whatever, like So if you see your parents doing that, it's not impossible.
Yeah,
It's not like, oh my God, you want to be a musician? How are you going to pay the bills? Well, like, I watched my parents do it.
yeah,
So it just seemed like the most. This is probably the longest, roundabout answer, but it seemed like the most logical choice, of not like something like I'm bucking the system. Like I was like, I've watched both of my parents do this. This is what I'm good at. And zooming it back real quick, like athletes have a very short window.
Yeah.
I was going to pursue, let's be honest, I would have not ranked on a national level as an athlete, you know. So where I enjoyed riding a bicycle very much, like being a success at it was a pipe dream in itself anyway. And then even if I were successful, the window would be very short, and then the next phase is coaching, right? So music, I'm watching people like my parents and also their contemporaries who are working all the way up until like the 80s.
Sure.
You know, you have people who like crest 90 and are still playing gigs in their 90s. I was like, right? So music school, that was
interesting.
And then I went to Berkeley in Boston, and there was really just kind of like no looking back. You know, I was immersed in a scene of people all the same age who were very, well, to say the same age, you know what I'm saying, within a window, but young musicians who were very passionate and hopeful with stars in their eyes about the future. You know, people like Jeremy Pelt and Antonio Sanchez. I'm trying to think, like, there's a lot of people that I went to Berkeley with who have become like superstars in the music and have taken it pretty much as far as they've wanted to take it. And that was an inspiring time to be at school. You know, there were all these young people who were so great, and they're still great now.
Oh,
so, yeah.
What about the jazz moment?
That was basically it. I'm sorry?
What was the jazz moment for you that you said like jazz? I mean, was it like as a teenager? I mean, like, did your parents show you some records, or like that you said like, oh shit, man, I want to play this kind of music? Or
well, I'm trying to think. Let's talk about, and this is probably, I don't think I've ever brought him up before, but you know, he's still around. Stanley Jackson was my public school band director. He liked jazz, and I think what was cool was that he was always trying to like show not just me, but the entire orchestra music class, you know, in public school in New Jersey. He was trying to show us all sorts of cool records like Frank Zappa, Paquito de Rivera, Sun Ra. He like played all sorts of crazy stuff for us. You know, that was kind of different from what I was hearing at home even. So then in jazz band, which was like, you know, that was an extracurricular thing where in addition to concert band, the people who were in jazz band would show up on a certain night of the week and we would rehearse, you know, and then play like a concert once a year, you know, standard high school jazz band stuff. But I think that I can remember a moment where I took a solo on a blues and everybody in the auditorium shot up and, you know, and I was kind of like almost surprised, you know. I was like, wow, I guess they liked it, you know, and it was thrilling, you know. And then I kind of started to like enjoy improvising. But then, of course, you know, along with improvising, then I got hooked at home, like trying to prepare. You know what I mean? And when I say prepare, I don't, you know, not like writing the solo or something.
No, yeah, but yeah, like the guidelines or whatever. Yeah.
So that was my first teacher about jazz was my dad. You know, I'd be like, hey, Dad, what are the notes on, you know, like, how come these notes, I can't find the right notes on this? And he's like, oh, well, it's because, you know, this chord is not like a dominant chord like on the blues. There's other things in here. Let's show it. And he would, you know, sit down at his Fender Rhodes piano and show me the actual chord, and then we would play up and down. And it was kind of like a dad's ear training harmony. But the way that he was teaching me was not to think of the notes like root, third, fifth, seventh, ninth, you know, like not to think of them like the Schillinger system, like up and down, but like a crossways, and also like using my ear to hear like, okay, do you hear that note creates tension, and you can move up or down to a note that resolves it and is consonant, you know. So practical ear training with the instrument in hand, right?
Yeah, that's important. Yeah.
So by the time I went to Berkeley, I mean, I had already kind of gotten my feet wet in it, for 4 years in high school, at home.
Yeah.
And by the time I got to college, it was kind of like the continuation of that, right? Where
Yeah.
then I was like, oh, this is kind of what Dad was talking about at home, So it's, I was watching something on the television the other day where they were talking about a famous bagel place in New York, right? And I was thinking, it was like Russ and Daughters or something like that, and a famous bagel place in New York, like lox and bagels, and that the kids just grew up in the family business. So if Dad had a pharmacy, then I probably like had an interest in pharmacy or business or commerce, or I continued on in the family business, like a lot of people do. So yeah.
How did you then, after finishing all the schools, started playing on the scene? And I mean, I remember back then there was like this platform. I don't think it exists anymore. E-music it was, and I had like a subscription for 30 euros. You could buy like 12 records, digital format. And I actually bought your first record. I think it was. I think I bought it then there in the introducing one. And
oh, cool.
And I still love that record. And how did you do that album and started playing on the scene, once you're out of the school, out of the cocoon? How was that for you?
I have to say that what you said kind of got truncated. You said that you like the record, but then you asked how did I make the record and something about the scene.
Yeah. I mean, how did you make that decide to do that record and entering the kind of the music, the jazz scene in New York then? Like, how was that like for you, coming out of the cocoon of the school? And
well, I actually made the record while I was in school.
Oh, okay.
I was at Manhattan School of Music. I was studying at Manhattan School of Music and getting my master's degree. So it kind of happened simultaneously. And honestly, what had happened was that I had met and befriended, this is funny, like the owner of that label was my classmate previously at Berkeley in the 90s.
Okay.
Like we would drink Sam Adams together and go to find late night eats and stuff, you know what I mean? Like Joe Sherbonnet, really nice guy. I don't know if he's still working in the music business. I don't even know if the label is actually still Native Language. I don't know if maybe he sold the catalog or whatever. I gotta check in with Joe. Hi, Joe. I hope you and the family are well. So he had a label, and we got to talking, and I think we ran into each other at an IAJE conference in New Orleans, and we exchanged business cards, and we hadn't seen each other in a long time, and we kept in touch, and then he asked me if I wanted to make a record, and I said yes, and I was given a budget, and I didn't know the first thing about making records, so I asked Bill Goodwin, because I knew that he produced a bunch of records. If you look, there's an era in the 80s and 90s where he doesn't even play on them all, but it's like you'll see his name as the producer.
Yeah.
Right? So I just put two and two together. I was like, maybe if all these great records have this mystery person, maybe I should get that, right? And it ended up being a very wise decision because he helped me come in under budget, right? And that was good. Then the label wanted to make another record. They were like, wow, because we weren't like milking them or anything. It was we did it very economically. Yeah. Also, I think it was good to have. I can get kind of tunnel vision on things, and I'm stubborn. I know this about myself, and it's good to have someone else that is not experiencing your personal mental flow about the project, and they have like this outside, non-emotional view about it. About, hey, let's do another take. I think you could sound better on that. Really? Oh, I was pretty happy with that. And then you listen back 2 weeks later and you're like, oh shit, they were right. Yeah. You know what I mean? So it was good to have a producer. And oddly, a lot of people tell me that that particular record, which is my first one, is their favorite.
Mm.
So
Yeah, you wrote beautiful music also. I mean, it's some nice music there also. And uh, when did you start composing also, by the way, speaking of your tunes?
that's a probably as a kid, like
Mm.
messing around with a Casio keyboard. I had the little white with like the micro size keys and stuff in my bedroom, like sitting in like I'm going to admit, like not even harmonic stuff, like playing the drum stuff, like the
Yeah,
tribal
I love
drums
that.
and like
Yeah,
just playing beats and coming up with certain things. Just I don't know, thinking creatively. So when did I first start writing music? Probably, if I'm being completely honest, like to fulfill a homework assignment.
okay,
Yeah, for real.
sure.
Like,
Yeah, sure.
so like, okay, messing around in the practice room and being creative is one thing, and I think a lot of people do that. And if you live with other musicians, and then you can hear you hear like certain repetitious things that people get into, and everybody does it. Okay, but then the first time that actually having like so on Monday morning at 10:30, you have to turn in.
Yeah.
You have to turn in something, and that was probably the first time that I actually got like serious about it and was like, oh shit. But then in addition to that, I didn't want to just turn in some dog shit. You know what I mean? Like I didn't want to just like, oh, I have to write something, so let me just get this done and turn it in and be done with it. I actually wanted to like write something that I liked.
Yeah, sure.
And then the process. So I think initially it was to fulfill an assignment, and that was good. And then when did I start writing? Like knowing that you have a record coming up.
Yeah, let's say that. Let's say the music for that record. I mean, how did those tunes come about?
It was kind of like so similarly. I was told that I had to come to the session with some tunes.
Yeah, okay. Then
So it was like it was like having a homework assignment, but instead of like oh, this is due and it's going to get a grade. It was like, oh shit, like so I started thinking about and envisioning how the tunes were going to sound, and writing as far as like not just like a bass note, but like writing like a bass line, and then something where, oh, this would sound cool if like the bass line was doubled in the left hand, or if there was alto flute in, so just started to to think in my mind's eye, imagination wise, what the things were going to sound like, and then using the saxophone and then transposing, and then so it was really just that I had a deadline. And for me, I think my personality type, I have a buddy, Gene Siegel. Have you checked out Gene Siegel, the guitar player?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, Gene just writes. He just writes like you or I wake up and brush our teeth and tie our shoes and go do stuff. Like he just, in his daily life, he just is always writing music. And for me, I don't really think that I work that way. I'm best when I have some kind of a deadline.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I'm the same. Yeah, most of us are like that. Yeah.
Feel the pressure of that deadline.
Yeah.
Yeah. It helps to motivate me to actually get my butt in gear to get the pen to the paper and do it.
Yeah.
But that's probably the progression, was like starting off in my bedroom with a Casio keyboard and just being creative in the practice room. Then while in school, having an assignment for homework. And then in the real world, having an assignment for the producer says, I want you to bring X number of tunes to this session.
Yeah.
Okay, Bill. So that was basically the progression. Yeah. There needed to be a need for it. Right.
Yeah. But was it easy for you becoming a band leader? I mean, like, or even now, like if you see your progress through the years, how have you developed in that segment?
No, I don't think it's easy. Well, you asked like is it easy to write music or is it easy to be a band leader? Which specifically are you asking?
I mean, like
Both?
in a sense, like how did you feel, you know, when basically you had those players there in the studio and you had to count off the tune and, you know, like this feeling the responsibility that basically everyone is there because of you. Like, how was that for you?
I think I handled it well. Like we did the session in under 6 hours and with
Okay.
minimal takes. If we have to do more than 2 takes, it's not going to get better.
No, no, that's for sure. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I find my best playing is typically on the first take.
Yep.
That's the most musical and where I'm not like imitating myself or whatever or chasing anything, or I'm just more in the moment on the first take. So probably most of the records that are out that are mine, what you're hearing is the first take.
Okay.
Or if there's something really tricky about the melody, you know, there are other records that I made with the music which I think a little harder than even it necessarily needed to be. You know what I mean? But I was trying for something. So maybe if the music was really difficult, we would have to do another take just to get the melody right.
Yeah.
And not like taking like the solo section of like the first take and the melody of the second take. I don't like that. That doesn't sound, it doesn't sound natural. So
yeah.
If the melody was stronger on a second take, we go with that. But so did I feel comfortable? I mean, the way that you're saying it, I think if I had thought of it in those terms, that everybody was there for me, I think I would have stressed myself out.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So you also have to consider that I was young. Maybe I would think that way a little more now. I was young and kind of like a headstrong, very, you know, like I said, tunnel vision, and very young and opinionated. And, you know, when I look back at myself, I there's a lot of cringing. You know,
Sure. Yeah.
You know,
what about those records?
That's just part of growing up. You know, I think you gotta learn by, you know, trying things and seeing what works, right? So looking back on that, you know, as a young guy in my 20s, I think I handled it well and we got the job done. Is writing music easy? Sometimes it is. There's a tune that I wrote, Blue as a Whistle. I brought my dog to the vet because he was sick and I had to put him down. And then when I came home, I was in the shower and I was like feeling really blue about missing my dog, Buford. And this melody just came to me in the shower and I kind of like whistled it and like heard the bass line underneath. And I was like, oh shit. You know, and I very quickly like got out of the shower. I was like, I need to write this down. And I wrote it down. And I think honestly, like writing it out, like it took like how long it would take to like to do one take in the studio. So that particular, the writing process was very natural. I didn't have to force anything. And it just came to me like in the moment. And then writing it down was very, so if they were all like that, I'd probably be a professional writer. They're not all like that. So other ones I like, I'll hear it like while I'm riding my bicycle.
Yeah, things like that. Yeah.
And then the pedals, you know, like climbing a hill. I'll get into like a thing with like the pedals and standing up out of the saddle, and I'm hearing the music, and it's like the soundtrack to what I'm doing in my life, you know.
Yeah.
And I have some things that have been floating around up here for years that I just haven't written down yet because I don't have a session with somebody saying, "Hey, man, bring some tunes." But I think that's the process. This stuff rattles around in my my creative brain for a while before I flesh it out to paper.
Yeah. Yeah.
Leading a band, do I find leading a band easy? No.
No, yeah. No, I wanted to ask you about leading a band with Scofield, Patitucci, and Dijonette. How was that like, man? I mean, that's...
Oh, man.
How
Well,
did you end up with those guys? Anyway, I mean, I love that's some incredible playing by everyone. Like, but how did those sessions happen? And counting off a tune with those guys in the studio, and like, I mean, that's crazy, right?
it is a little crazy. There are some moments on those two because there's two records
Yeah,
from that.
yeah,
There's the record on Vector Disc, Homage,
Homage, yeah.
and there's the
Home with
Ballads
You.
record.
Yeah, yeah,
Sure.
yeah,
Yeah, that one's on
yeah.
Steeplechase.
That's a
So
beautiful one, yeah.
thank you. There were moments where I was like listening, with the headphones in the studio and my eyes closed, and I remember thinking like this sounds like one of my favorite records. I mean, I was playing with my heroes. It was
Sure.
very surreal, you know. Um, yeah, there were a lot of times where I caught myself. I was like, "Oh my god, this sounds like Gateway, a trio or
Yeah,
something,"
yeah, yeah,
or sounds like Meant to Be, or
yeah.
Time on
Time
My
on my hands,
Hands.
yeah, or something. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right? I mean, it was, and then I was like, "Oh shit, I have to come back in," and then and it's like then I'm back into the interactive, not stressing myself out, just like in the music, and thinking and reacting. So how did that come about? Those two records were recorded in 2010. My father had passed in 2009, and quite honestly, if he had still been around, I honestly think those records would have been Jerry playing.
Mm,
I was telling Dad for years, I was like, all of these people, when we bump into them somewhere, they're so happy to see you.
mm.
They rave about like the effect that your music had on them. Rick Margitza talks about like you being like his primary influence in his young
Oh,
years. Like there's a lot of people that really like you, like and from my perspective, he was like just in the trenches at Radio City and doing Liza Minnelli and just like working, but not being himself or
mm.
expressing himself as an artist. He was like a cog, you know, one cog in a machine,
Yeah.
and he did it great. And he was a consummate professional. But I thought that he needed to scratch the itch of being able to express himself, and he was always writing all this music, right? So I had been pushing him to do something like that for himself because I thought that it would feel good. It's like, why are you writing all this music? You should play this stuff with people that the jazz audience is going to want to hear you play with.
Mm.
And then he died, and it didn't happen, and that was tragic to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So um life goes on. I was touring in Spain, and I get this email that my mom and sister and my ex-wife, they had been like digging through, like looking for stuff, and they found these like notebooks, spiral bound, staff paper, pencil,
Oh, wow.
and
Beautiful.
yeah, and there
Mm.
was like 79 songs in there.
Wow.
And
Crazy.
we all remember after dinner he would like sneak up to his third floor space to play his Fender Rhodes, and he would bring a wine glass and a bottle of wine, and he would go up or sit down at the Steinway piano on the first floor. uh, he would just sit and play, and he would play chords, and then he would sing the melodies. So I have to say, a lot of those tunes, like I heard his voice, crackles and
Oh.
all, like I heard him singing the melodies, how he wanted them phrased, and playing the changes and stuff like that throughout moments of life where like we would have a backyard barbecue, and then he would go and play music, right? So
Oh.
I mean, you can't get more personal than that.
Yeah.
It would, you talk about having the music mean something to the
Yeah.
artist playing.
Yeah.
Something to me.
Yeah.
So first was like reading through the charts, and that's like it's like finding recipes for for something. You know, all the mixes were there, and it would have like the, you know, like this, maybe like might be good as a samba or a swing, you know.
Mm.
You know,
Yeah,
there
yeah.
were like little notes, things like that, and it was just kind of like playing through the tunes, playing them, and trying to like make different piles, right? And I was like, oh, I think these tunes kind of, they would sound together good if we played that as a set at a club or a record or something.
Mm.
These, and then this stuff, there's a lot of stuff that I think would be great down the road, you know. If someone wanted to dive in and try to like you know, get into that, there's a lot of stuff that I think would be like a really great Brazilian record where
Mm.
I think
Wow.
he'd be checking out and really being into Latin and Brazilian music. So just grouping the tunes in piles, right? As far as like what tunes sound good together, and then so then again, Bill Goodwin had he's good at that. I mean, he called up everybody and said, "Hey,
Oh, well,
uh,
okay.
here's the idea. You know, we got these tunes. Jerry didn't get to record them. His son wants to record them. You down?"
Wow.
And
Okay.
yeah, and you know, Dad had worked with I think not Patitucci. Patitucci, they had worked together when Patitucci was like a young guy,
Yeah.
you know, in L.A. But DeJohnette, I don't think Dad had ever played with Jack, but Dad had played with Scofield. They all had a connection. So I think the fact that it was a year after, it was still fresh in everybody's minds, and then, you know, there's a bunch of music that was meant to be recorded by the
Mm.
composer. He's not here, so his son is going to do it. So that was kind of I was compelled to do that. It felt like I needed to do it, and it was kind of a cathartic experience. I'm glad I did.
Yeah, man. It's beautiful, man.
At this stage of my life now in 2024, like to go back and like start like digging that stuff up, you know, and doing that it's a little much. It's a lot of, it takes a lot of energy. It's very exhausting, and it puts me in a certain kind of like headspace that is
Yeah, yeah. Yep.
I just don't need to be in anymore, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, so I'm glad that we did it. You know, it's a good thing. The records are out, and they're
Oh,
going to be
man.
out forever. You know, so that's basically that's the story there. Yeah,
Wow.
I don't think it would have happened without the course of events leading up into it.
Yeah, it was meant to be. Like, yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Incredible, man. Yeah. Uh, yeah, I mean, I wanted to ask you about that because it's just like for me, like you said, you know, uh, I had like a year and a half ago a tour with Arild Andersen, the bass player from Norway, and Bob Moses on drums, and we had like 17 gigs, and for me it was the same, you know. We played a tune, I played a hat, and left those guys improvise, and I just closed my eyes, and I was like, man, this is so great. And I think like probably 4 minutes still, I didn't join in. Sometimes I was like, oh shit, oh maybe I should slowly down, you know, because I heard those records those guys were on, and it's like what you said, you know, it's incredible. Yeah.
yeah, it's inspiring to hear
Inspiring. Yeah,
people like that
exactly. Yeah.
sound.
Yeah.
You know
Yeah.
the sound. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
it's theirs. There's so many imitators too. There's so many
But that's the
people
originals.
who
Yeah.
you can hear Sco's sound in so many guitar players. You can hear Jack
Ah,
DeJohnette's phrasing in the way that he orchestrates from the drum set
yeah.
in a lot of other drummers playing. So
Yeah.
we all do that where we play with people and we can hear their influences in them, right? But then to play with the actual, like, holy shit, okay,
Exactly.
this is
Yeah.
the source of that. Yeah,
Scary. Yeah.
it was invaluable, and I'm glad I did it.
Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Adam, not to take too much of your time, but you mentioned Pat Martino before, and you know, I wanted to touch upon that also. Like me being a guitarist, how was the Pat story for you, and how did you end up on that gig?
That was a result of, you know, Pat had a trio with Carmen and Torre
Yeah.
and Pat Bianchi long before the horns, and I think they wanted to add two horns to allow how do I say? It gives you a rest.
Yeah.
Like
Space.
playing
Yeah.
guitar.
Yeah.
Playing guitar trio, there's a lot of energy to be expelled all the time, leading. And I think what they wanted to do is they wanted to add a couple more voices, melody voices specifically, to the group. So how did that arise? Man, we basically just got together at a place on the outskirts of Philadelphia in New Jersey, on the Jersey side. It was like a big barn that Pat rented for rehearsals, and we all just drove out there and had a rehearsal, and it was like very very chill.
Okay.
It wasn't normal. It was kind of like just getting together to play like a jam session a little bit, but like here's this, he glows. You know what I mean? Like Pat has like talk about a star. Like when he entered the room, it was
Yeah.
like he had like an emanating aura about him. It was terrifying, and he was so small. You know what I mean? It wasn't like he was like a big imposing like character, but it's like such huge energy coming out of a very small man. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, what was it like playing with him? Immediately when he started playing, I heard where all the other guys got it from. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Whoa. Now, I'm going to admit that I had not really checked out any Pat Martino. I knew who he was. Going to Berkeley with that many guitar players, you heard the name Pat Martino, and there were a lot of people who were really into Pat Martino, and I heard it, and I didn't know what to think. It was like very, at the time, it was like very like full octane, high octane, like just pushing the limit of like like exhaustion, right? And I heard it and I was like, wow, but I didn't really delve fully into it and check it out, right? So then I got the gig and I had to do my homework, so I I got Live, the live trio.
Yeah, that's a nice record. Yeah.
Got that one, and I got the stuff with Joey DiFrancesco, and I just started like downloading records off of iTunes and trying to like get everything. The Joyous Lake.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
There was very quickly figured out that there was a lot of music that this guy had made. Very intense, difficult music.
Yeah.
And I just started kind of trying to digest it, listening to it while going on runs, go for a run and like listen to it in the headphones. Every time I went for a drive, I was just like on a total Pat Martino binge for a bit to get into it. And as I'm listening to it in the car, it became evident that he was the source. Like I heard where Vic Juris,
yeah,
and where even Kurt Rosenwinkel. I heard.
I mean, all these guys. Yeah.
How they construct the lines and how and then watching him play, like his hand across his left hand specifically across the fretboard, how it just looked. He made it look easy.
Yeah, far from it. Yeah.
No, I mean, you're a guitar player.
Yeah,
he made the intensely difficult look
easy. Yeah,
like it was just like a tarantula crawling across the fretboard, right? And it was effortlessly and with really thick, heavy gauge strings.
Yeah,
but he wasn't like his arm wasn't like a bodybuilder or something. Like he didn't look like he was trying very hard. It was very like light. And, yeah,
amazing.
So, what was it like working with him? He was amazing. He could go from like locker room humor with the boys backstage before the gig, like where he was like like an adolescent, like making just very silly jokes, to like talking about metaphysics and crazy things, and a complex character.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, what I've heard. Yeah.
Yeah, very
Amazing.
genuine human. What I noticed is that when he would get off the stage, he would talk to everybody. It wasn't like he was going to refuse FaceTime with the fans, and I think that was, he genuinely like engaged with everybody. And if there was a line at the bar of people, he would talk to all of them.
Wow.
So I think that was, also guys like Michael Brecker, like where these iconic figures do not act like superstars, like like I'm up on a pedestal and you can't talk to me. Don't you know who I am? I'm an iconic like figure. Like, no, man, they were relatable and approachable, and they would get like right into like a deeply engaged, looking in the eyes of the person they were talking with like a line of like 12 people waiting to have that same experience, one after the other after the other. And I used to think to myself, like, wow, you just played like 2 sets, like you must be exhausted. And he probably was, but he gave everybody that FaceTime one-on-one. And it was evident in, I think that's why he had these like super fans.
Yeah.
Because they remembered like how he was so genuine with them 35 years ago, and they kept coming back to check in. And then he'd be like, "Of course I remember you." You know what I mean? How are you? And that's, yeah, he was, he didn't act like a god. He acted like a very down to earth, genuine, relatable human being. And I think that's not to be overlooked.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he paid his dues, did his own story, and with everything. I mean, what he went through, obviously, it's like, yeah.
For everything that most normal people go, he had 2 lives.
Yeah. Yeah.
He did it twice.
Yeah. I've read his biography. I mean, autobiography, or is it biography? And it's incredible when I read that. I'm like, man, really? It's to relearn everything. That's crazy, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
exactly.
You or I can't.
Yeah.
There's something fascinating about it where people.
Yeah.
If you have any degree of empathy and you contemplate what that would be like, it's very scary.
Man, the will and that you want to do it, that's amazing.
Well, yeah. Yeah. If the spirit is determined, then no doctor saying, no,
yeah,
you're never going to be able to do that again. Watch me.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it's inspiring. It's inspiring. Yeah. Hey man, the family's snowboarding. So you had mentioned previously, you can edit this a little bit out if you want for the flow later, but you had mentioned, I don't want to take up too much of your time. It's just me and the dogs, and it's a Sunday.
Okay.
I'm enjoying myself. So I went for a run earlier, and so you don't have to feel, if ask all your questions, we can get through everything.
Yeah, it's kind of we touched like everything that I want to talked about, basically. So, but I wanted to ask you, also what's on the schedule for you still this year? I mean, do you have some gigs coming up, or tours, or are coming to Europe soon one day, or?
Honestly, all that would be determined on if listen, if somebody was to call up and say, hey, I have these dates in Europe, would you like to come over and play?
Sure.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, of course. I think there was let's say a rumor floating around that like I'm terrified of flying, and I'm sure you could put 2 and 2 together, that like, that would seem right. But I got on an airplane like 2 weeks after the event and went and played with Carl Allen, and I went to Spain and did an entire tour of Spain. I've been all over and have flown many times. So I'm absolutely not scared of flying. I would go to Europe or anywhere. I think that, realistically, like after COVID and having to kind of like readjust, we all had to kind of figure out like, well, what are we going to do? right? When touring stopped. And there's another element to my business where, you know, certain people, they're like, oh, Adam Niewood, the mouthpiece guy.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
you know, yeah, we talked to, I love talking about music, you know, more than I do mouthpieces, which is more like, you know, like gearheads sitting around talking about strings and pickups. It's not the same as like, you know, what favorite records and the feeling behind the music, right? So, but there is another element and a side to me where I think that the bicycle mechanic of 17 years.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you about mouthpieces. Yeah.
Yeah, you're more than welcome to.
Yeah.
Because it's very much a part of who I am and what I do. So, in addition to loving to play music, you know, I always had to pay the bills and rent and money, and you know, we all need it, right? So, I think, you know, especially in younger, now I get tired, but you know, in younger years when I was like a teenager and in my early 20s, I could just go all day. Where like, you know, what do you do during the daytime when you're waiting for gigs? And the bicycle store opened at 11. Perfect. You know, not too early.
Yeah.
And it closes at like 6 o'clock. So then what jazz gig is happening at, you know, between 11 a.m. and 6 p.m.? None of them. So being a bicycle mechanic was like the thing that always was a constant in my life. And you know, you probably see the trend. The transition usually is that you don't see somebody with silver hair, you know, in middle age, like working as the mechanic at the bicycle store. It's a young man's job, right? So typically the person opens up their own store and then they employ other young people,
Yeah.
right? So the next thing was like, well, what am I going to do with this skill set of liking to work with tools? And I mean, that's a whole, you could do a whole podcast on this story.
Yeah, no, yeah. I just wanted to ask you if like how you actually started it. I mean, why you started?
Well, the reason why I started, there was a gentleman named John Van Wee,
Mhm.
and if you can think about like who do you take your guitar to get it set up? Who does your guitar setups?
No, I do it.
You don't have to answer.
Yeah, but yeah,
Yeah.
okay, I know what you mean. Yeah,
You have a guy that you like, right?
yeah,
And you develop a connection with that person where like if something were to happen to the person that you just naturally like, oh, my guitar feels funny, I'm going to go see my tech. If something were to happen to that person and then you couldn't see them anymore, that would be like a
yeah,
thing. You'd be like, oh, shit, what am I going to do now? So I had developed a close personal relationship with the guy who set up my mouthpieces. And when he got sick with cancer and he passed away, that really, it was poignant because I thought to myself, I was like, wow, this guy understood, like really understood. He wasn't just shooting in the dark. He had a concept, right? And it's a dying art form, and there's like so much bad gear out there
Oh.
that is like, it's about a written, they've written up the product description and they spent more time on that than they actually did the precision of the product, right? So I went on a quest to find out who taught John Van Wee, and I found John Van Wee's teacher.
Oh, okay.
I said, I was like, hey man, you know, this is tragic what happened to John, and I don't want what John understood and knew to die with John. It needs to be carried on for future saxophonists. And I'm fascinated by it. But I didn't, you know, at that point, I didn't think that I was going to be good at it. But I was curious, and I knew that there was something I wanted to know for myself. I wanted to know what's the difference between the good ones and the bad ones. You know, it has to be something tangible. What is it? You know, it's not just like voodoo and like feathers and chicken blood and stuff and you know, putting a spell on it. This is science. Like, so what is it? So that was initially it was wanting to know what's the difference between what works and what doesn't. And then it became like, well, it's a very difficult job, and I like it, and I think that's why I kind of became obsessed with it, because it is the ultimate puzzle.
Yeah.
You know, And then at the end of it, you get to play the puzzle. And I love playing saxophone. And then the other thing is that because I don't want to say like, because I'm a good saxophone player, but I studied the instrument to a place where my taste is, I can use my taste as a barometer if the instrument works or not.
Yeah.
Right? And chances are, if I think it works really great, then Dana Stevens or John Ellis or all of my contemporary, same age, young saxophone players or old. I don't even know why I brought up the age, but you know what I'm saying? Like that's honestly it. But you know what I mean? Like if I like it, my contemporaries are probably going to like it too. And it just kind of turned itself into with no advertising or anything, it turned itself into a very a viable business, which it keeps me very busy, but it is a gift. Ted Klum, this beautiful gift of being able to say no to a gig that I would be doing only for the money.
Yeah, that's way better. Yeah.
Well,
yep. I think it is.
Right? If I go to the job and the only thing I'm there for is the money, I don't like the people, I don't like the music, I don't like anything about it, but it's just solely transactional.
Yep.
Then that comes across.
Yeah.
It comes across to the people that you're playing. Tell that you don't want to be there. The audience can tell that you don't want to be there, right? And then it picks up on it. It's bad all around, So, but I feel bad for people who have to they feel that they need to do everything, otherwise they're gonna default on their bills. So, the mouthpiece thing has enabled to be picky and just to stop playing gigs where people are talking over you and not paying attention, or at the end of the gig they hand you a bill for the food that you weren't expecting, or all of the
I know what you mean. Yeah.
So so it keeps my heart in the right place when I play, which is good.
That's important. Yeah.
When's your next gig, man? Tell me, you have any tours coming up?